Hey YouTube, Joeboy here. So, One Piece Chapter 1097 is out. If you guys haven't checked out that chapter yet, I suggest that you do so because I will be spoiling you. But now that you have, let's begin. Honestly guys, it just hit me how long we've done the same intro. I guess creeping up on 300 chapters? Jeez. I'm not gonna change it, but like feeling of oldness just hit me like a truck. But hey, we're still here, and a big reason for that is chapters like these. Once again, it's a flashback. You guys already know, Oda does not miss. But you know, despite this being a flashback and Oda pretty much nailing all of these, I think that once this is completed, even right now, I just feel like when we come back and look at this and compare it to other ones, this is definitely one of the best. We're basically eating 2 meals in one. And it's even more impressive given the fact that, at least for me, I was not that highly invested in Kuma before this arc. Absolutely not saying that I hated him, but he was just a character among many. And it's different than going into like Big Mom's flashback, for instance, or Doflamingo and Law's flashback, where I just felt like I wanted to know that story. I had to know that story. Any of the Straw Hats are the same. With Kuma's, I knew for a long time that there was something there, but I never actually spared a thought for it, honestly. Aside from theories that we made 8 years ago about Vegapunk potentially having a deal with Kuma and being a part of the Revolutionary Army. You guys remember the Order 66 theory? Basically like the clones from Star Wars. But yeah, in Egghead, Oda has been leading up into this flashback the whole time. He has basically screamed that this flashback contains the missing piece to bring the arc together. I just get the feeling that this flashback is going to set up pretty much the actions of a bunch of characters. Obviously Kuma and Bonnie, I think maybe also Vegapunk and Kizaru. But despite knowing all this, I'd put my hype level at somewhere like 8, 8.5. But yeah, straight up, we're hearing it now, it's been a 9.5, 10. And a lot of it is good old-fashioned execution. Aside from the easy wins of introducing characters and setting up events that we're absolutely hyped for, just gut punch after gut punch. The moment which absolutely destroyed me in this chapter was when Kuma took in all of the elderly's pain. Bro, I cannot even express to you how pure Kuma is. If we could choose any character in the entire One Piece universe to be on your crew, like, Kuma is on my list. He is on my crew. I'm recruiting that guy. It's crazy. We talk about parallels a lot. Oda uses the same or similar concept. He repeats them in the story. But like a consistent thing that he does with them is he changes how they appeal. So what I'm talking about here is taking in pain. We saw this at the end of Thriller Bark. And the idea behind it was, I guess, for Zoro to have an appreciation for the sacrifices his captain makes. And at the same time, it was almost a test of worthiness. Did Dragon's Son have the right people following him? And this test was no joke, because Zoro could have actually died. So with this flashback, Oda took the same nuts and bolts and just created a moment which feels so drastically different. Everything Zoro does is almost always directly related to achieving his own personal dreams. The crew is important to Zoro, Luffy is important to Zoro because he needs them. So when he takes on the pain, it's a challenge. But when Kuma does it here, it's because he doesn't want other people to suffer. It has absolutely nothing to do with himself. Even people who are totally insignificant, or are seen that way by others. It's clear to Kuma everyone is significant. So yeah, it might be incorrect or blasphemous to say that Kuma is the opposite of Zoro, but certainly they are very different in this respect, and so you get the same sort of scene, and it's just as great in like the opposite way. I also find it incredibly cool. Obviously, we as a collective group of One Piece fans have read a lot of One Piece chapters. There is a ton of characters, but I don't think that anybody is quite like Kuma. Can we just appreciate the creativity? Please. But the crazy contrast of the Kuma that we knew for the vast majority of the story until the flashback here, and we can see the difference. And how basically the greatest person in the entire One Piece universe has been stripped of his personality. It is so tragic. The amount of characterization and love Oda has given to Kuma is just crazy. I would never have guessed. I almost do not want to continue the flashback because I fear a moment where Kuma breaks, which in part justifies what has happened to him and the decisions he has made. I'm going to include this theory at the end of the review. But honestly guys, just know I don't think that anybody can be prepared for it. It is heavy. But yeah, despite saying this and despite having a sort of fear of it, you know, I'm not even certain that Kuma breaks. Ever. I want to make sure you guys know that. This man is already so strong that you can believe nothing can defeat him, mentally. Either way, Kuma is like the giving tree. Kuma is happy so long as he has something to give. I don't know if you guys read this children's story, but it's really sad. Talking about the giving tree. The tree befriends a boy. Along every stage of this boy's life, the tree has something to give. Whether it's the pure entertainment of using it as a swing, providing apples, providing branches to build a house. And the whole time the tree is happy. At least until the very end when it's just a stump. It no longer has anything else to give. And so the boy, now an old man, is like, well, I don't need to climb you anymore. I don't have any energy. I already have a house. My teeth are gone. I can no longer eat your apples. Honestly, I'm tired and could just use a place to sit. And so I feel like Oda is doing something similar with Kuma. Kuma is happy when he has something to give, and that left him in the current state of the One Piece story having nothing left to give. But the twist ending is to utilize what he has remaining to him as a final gift. And with that, the tree will die happy. Something like that. But anyway, after the last chapter, we predicted that Kuma's flashback in the situation in Sorbet is going to mimic or mirror Drum Island, where Kuma is essentially Dalton. And I think that this has overall been proven true. Oda tells us that there is a new king of Sorbet Kingdom, and this is very similar to Wapol and Drum Island, who succeeded his father, who had actually been beloved. This new king is a bootlicker of the Celestial Dragons and seems to be taking guidance from them. Honestly, the conspiracy theorist within me wants to speculate that there's something more to this. Like, another really low-key detail is in Sorbet you have this village of old people. And TCB translated one of them saying there are hardly any young people left in this country. Which makes some sirens go off in my brain of why is this the case? What is happening to all the children? Or maybe it's simple and Oda's just communicating how difficult it is to have children given the climate of the kingdom. It's basically explained to us that the country is not very productive. So I gather that the king themselves cannot become wealthy because all of their money is going to the Celestial Dragon Heavenly Tribute. And too many people cannot pay. So he gets the bright idea of having his nation's population. Because the tax is dependent on the number of people, which is probably really similar to Arlong and Arlong Park. And also the same in Arlong Park, it sort of explained to us why somebody wouldn't want children. They cost too much, which is why Belmere had to hide their existence. So he splits the island in half and only claims the productive people, leaving the other part totally lawless. This also reminds me of Wapol and Drum Island because Blackbeard arrives and kind of dethrones Wapol. He runs away, but as he leaves, he takes all of the nation's doctors. So he takes the productive part of his own kingdom, leaving the things that he did not want and did not bother to defend to become lawless and ruled by pirates. Do you guys see how this is similar? But we know how this story goes. Wapol leaves and Dalton becomes king, basically, even though he didn't really want that. And Kuma is portrayed very similar with the southern half of Sorbet Kingdom, leader of the leftovers. And honestly, if you just compare Dalton and Kuma's personalities, they are actually fairly similar. Dalton is also a giver and pure of heart. I suppose this is also similar to another leader of leftovers that we met recently in Yasui. And also in the way that Dalton is designed, he almost looks like he could have Buccaneer blood as well. You guys already know the crazy upper body. It looks like it's been injected with air in the noodle legs. Dalton obviously would have to be less Buccaneer than Kuma, but it works for me. Honestly, it's really cool that the further that we get into the story, you get some explanations potentially for some of the wacky designs that probably Oda didn't have Buccaneers in mind when he drew. Kuma has basically stated that he wants to be like Nika. And I find it interesting that Drum Kingdom is called Drum Kingdom. It reminds me of the drums of liberation. Dalton eventually becomes king of this kingdom, and like Kuma, he is a liberator. Also, we're led to believe that Kuma eventually becomes the king of Sorbet. But to reach this point, he has to first become a hero. That's what he calls Dragon in the Freedom Fighters, who he learns about through the newspaper. That is to say that he can't just be a pacifist. To take away people's pain and minimize their suffering, to heal their sick hearts in Drum Island terminology, he must fight, which is also a decision that Dalton comes to. In addition, both of these characters come to this decision after the king has abandoned his kingdom. But anyway, I highly suggest that you read chapter 151 of One Piece, which is near the end of Drum Island, and the dialogue between Wapol and Dalton should remind you of the circumstances of this flashback with Kuma. Dalton is even thrown into jail for a period of time, just like Kuma. And I suppose the last similarity is that ultimately neither Dalton nor Kuma seem to succeed in their objective themselves. They were both saved by outsiders. Drum Island, it was obviously the Strats, pirates, and here in this flashback we can see the Revolutionary Army arrives, both portrayed as heroes. But yeah, for sure, reading this story and the hypotheticals it poses definitely makes you think. This lore relates to pretty much every revolution that has ever existed. Oda is basically throwing out the question of whether peace and order are worthwhile, if the ones determining law are themselves unjust. I also found it potentially noteworthy that the tactic the king used was to create haves and have-nots. Initially, the people of the northern province did not like these new laws, but the king speculates that soon they'll grow accustomed to it, and before long it won't bother them, because they'll see the Southerners as vermin. He even says to cut out the cancer will save the country. And it's infuriating because these celestial dragons created this cancer. The society was built so that some people would definitely fail. This leads to Kuma saying, Jenny, this country is on the brink of becoming a cesspool of bigotry and hate. This reminds me of the various races in the story of One Piece, and I kind of want to apply it to the past. Essentially, was there ever a time where non-human peoples were stripped of their citizenship, of whatever island that they might have lived in? We like to think that the fishmen and the minks and the dwarves and the giants had particular homes in the distant past, like islands that belonged to them, the island of fishmen. But what if instead the people that we see on Fishman Island today are actually descendants of people who came from many different islands? And then the same as the people of the southern province, they became targets of slavery, and the law allowed this. If you read into the history of the Tantata and Dressrosa, that's basically what they suggested. Originally, they lived with the people of Dressrosa, not separate to them. They were forced into hiding because of what they called their great era of slavery, instigated by the Don Quixote family. And the timeline is also interesting because the Tantata king reveals that this occurred over 900 years ago. Basically, it was just before the Void Century. But you can make more of these comparisons if you want to. That manifests in interesting ways. The story that we get of Dragon in this chapter reflects the story of Luffy in Drum Island. It may be true at this time that Dragon calls himself a freedom fighter, and Luffy would probably never do that, but that is what the strats have been. Luffy is also now the god liberator of mythology. But we get a really fascinating line from Dragon in the chapter. He says, I want to grow us into a boundless army spread throughout the world. And if you guys notice, in essence, Dragon is recreating the Marines, which makes a lot of sense because the theories that a lot of people have speculated about Dragon came true in this chapter. It's finally revealed that Dragon was formerly a Marine, which always made the most sense. Because of course Garp would make Dragon into a Marine. But it seems like Dragon likes the idea of them, just not the organization. So he's starting from scratch. But for me, it makes me think about the origin of the Marines themselves. Were they created as part of a past revolution? Look guys, I just have a feeling that Joy Boy created what is now called the Marines. Like Luffy and Dragon both, Joy Boy was a hero that checked the powers of gods and kings. And you guys already know that I think that Joy Boy was also a pirate. This would make the title of Hero of Marines something analogous to Pirate King, which is just a really cool idea in my opinion. But the idea is that Joy Boy is just like Dragon. He's the hero of the world at some point during his life. Certainly Nika has that reputation, and we presume that Joy Boy had the Nika fruit, because that's what Zunisha basically tells us. Maybe if he's like Luffy, the inspiration for creating this mass army is just to protect his friends, which span across the world. Regardless, I like to believe that Joy Boy was both the king of the pirates and the hero of the Marines. Both of those things simultaneously. And this also works for me going back to the one-shot versions of One Piece before it was serialized. Oda distinguished two distinctly different kinds of pirates. There was Morganeers and there was Peace Mains. The word Peace Main was always very strange to me, but as like a title of a group or a position, similar to Marines, Peace Mains, that just makes sense to me. But anyway, let's not get too carried away here. The whole reason we went on this tangent is because Oda really hammers in that the people of the southern district were about to be enslaved. Dragon frees the slaves like Nika, and then Oda reveals his intention to recreate the Marines, which makes me wonder if Nika created the Marines. Does this logic check out? Are you guys following me, or am I just going off crazy? I didn't even throw in there that I also have a suspicion that Joy Boy might have unintentionally become king of the world. King of the world, hero of the Marines, pirate king. The man who obtained it all. Yeah, feel me? But yeah, to get back to the chapter itself, we haven't talked about Jenny at all. And honestly, it's because I'm scared to talk about her. But definitely a part of me is a little hesitant to invest just because I know that she's likely going to die. Like, I want to invest. I know it'll hit harder. It's just, do I really want to? In a way, she's the anti-Kuma, and it makes her all the more lovable because of the contrast. She protects Kuma from himself, as the man who wants nothing more than to give, and would absolutely do so until he has nothing left. But yeah, straight up, this is probably the greatest couple in all of One Piece. You really can't design it much better, because while she acts to save Kuma, Kuma probably acts to save her. Together, they are perfect. I have never shipped in my life, but I ship this. At this point, we don't know what actually happened to Jenny in the past. How did she become a slave? And honestly, I'm hoping and praying that we get this story and this gets explained, because even as a child, she was a professional wiretapper. That's insanity. The only thing which even remotely makes sense to me is that as a child she was possibly a member of Cypherpole, which would be a hell of a story. But needless to say, the impression that we're given of her is that her worldview is not as rosy as Kuma's. But maybe similar to Kuma, she is willing to put her life on the line to fight for what she believes in the ways that she believes that she could be successful. So long story short, I feel like her relationship with Kuma saved her. It allowed her to grow up because she wanted to believe in his worldview and his way of fighting. As Kuma is compared to Nika, I mean, basically what Kuma is doing is just spreading joy in its purest form. So yeah, I think that Jenny probably was always a member of the Revolutionary Army, or at least heavily considered it throughout this entire time period. When she explains to Kuma that the king is becoming a puppet of the Celestial Dragons, it's just telling how much she seems to know. When Kuma talks about Dragon being a hero, there's a ... thinking text box from Jenny as if she has thoughts she doesn't want to share. And for sure, I do not believe it to be a coincidence that the Revolutionary Army decides to arrive at Sorbet. Jenny almost definitely did the same thing that she did in God Valley. The professional wiretapper sent out a message asking for help. And for me, it's just beautiful to think that Jenny waited, didn't impress her worldview on Kuma at all, until she felt like Kuma arrived at the same conclusion on his own. But yeah, their relationship is just so great. It really is. They both clearly love each other, but there's reasons they can't be together, which is like how all the greatest romance stories are structured. At this point, I think you would have to be a fool to not believe that Bonnie is their child. But despite saying that, frankly, I think the door is still open that it's more complicated than it seems. Mainly, we never get a resolution to Kuma's resistance to marriage. Then it seems as part of the Revolutionary Army, they were separated, and we never see Jenny pregnant. Obviously, I believe that we will know here for sure shortly. But I would say that after several weeks, I'm coming to the team that Bonnie is some kind of clone. Certainly, it would explain why Bonnie doesn't really look like she has any Buccaneer blood. Maybe after Jenny died, Kuma asked this of Vegapunk as their spiritual child. Man, guys, my heart cannot take this, even the thought of it. Which would kind of make sense as to maybe what Oda would choose here if I'm getting that feeling just thinking about it. But Oda can also get really dark if he wants to. And I'm just kind of curious as to what you guys think. At the end, we see that Jenny is captured. And it seems likely to me that she is captured either by bounty hunters or the world government itself. But based on the translation I read, they do specifically say captured and not arrested. And I think that as a member of the Revolutionary Army, she would have a bounty. So my thought is, guys, is that Jenny was captured by pirates after her bounty. This could also explain a lot about Kuma becoming a warlord. It's something even Dragon doesn't seem to understand. It wasn't part of his plans. Think back to the end of Thriller Bark and Kuma's general demeanor, his desire to test the Strat pirates. Do you guys think that it's possible that he has a legitimate grudge against pirates? And he had to know for sure the kinds of pirates that these Strats were before deciding their fate. In Thriller Bark, Kuma even said that he would begin with Zoro. Zoro, who had previously been a somewhat famous bounty hunter. And the fight definitely seemed to have changed the moment that Zoro offered himself, as if it could have reminded Kuma of who he once was. But basically we're speculating that before this occurred, Kuma actually intended to take out the Strats, perhaps justifying his grudge against pirates. But as we saw in Sabaody, a person captured for their bounty can quickly become a slave. So my dark thought is that Jenny did in fact have a child in Bonnie, just that Kuma is not the father, and she never fell in love with anybody else. Do you understand what I'm saying? Both pirates and celestial dragons are known scumbags. Perhaps it's foreshadowing that when Bonnie encountered Blackbeard just after Marineford, that Blackbeard explains the only use that he sees for her is for her to become his woman. Or if Bonnie is half celestial dragon, it might explain why she was in Mary Joie. Right now, this definitely makes more sense to me than some convoluted path to Kuma himself having a child with Jenny. Even though that is absolutely what you should be believing right now because we are in tinfoil land. But yeah, guys, this is a theory that I'm really scared about. I hope it happens, I hope it doesn't happen. I think you guys understand. Can One Piece get this dark? I think that it can. Will it? Obviously, we will find out. But we clearly have more story because Kuma is not yet king of Sorbet, nor is it explained why he's called a tyrant. So make sure you stay buckled up. But yeah, guys, this feels like a good place to end the review. I think that I touched on everything, and overall the chapter felt pretty fast-paced. It felt shorter. But once again, I couldn't be any more excited to see what comes next. But yeah guys, as always, let me know what you think. Let me know if you noticed something from the chapter that I might have missed. Just share your thoughts. Would love it if you checked out my books, The Booms. Links in the description as well as pinned in the comments. If you guys do happen to read it, just leave a review. Let other people know how you felt about it. But yeah, like the video, subscribe, click the bell to be notified, join the squad, and as always guys, have a wonderful day.